Hey there, it's your old pal Keith from Wavetables.lol. That's Wavetables.lol, home of KRC Math Waves, my gigantic collection of wavetables, single cycle waveforms, and even some samples for all sorts of modern synthesizers, including our friend Korg Modwave native here, which I'll be playing today. And KRC Math Waves is a collection of mathematically generated waveforms and wavetables. But of course, there are other ways that we could make wavetables. And one way we might attempt to make a wavetable is by converting an audio sample into a wavetable, right? And what we're hearing right now, actually, is a little combination patch that morphs a vocal sample into a violin ensemble via wavetables. And so you can hear that this sound like morphs across the keyboard, like lower it's a little more stringy and higher it's a little more vocal. But also over time, those two wavetables morph together in a phase-locked way. And it does sound something like we were playing samples. Now, I'm sure I've said in other videos on this channel in the past that I don't really think that converting samples to wavetables is really, the right way to make wavetables. There's another similar patch. And the reason I say that it might not be the right way is that usually the types of things that people are trying to do, right, are they're like, oh, I've got a Moog and I want to sample the unique waveforms of the Moog and like turn it into a wavetable or something, right? They've got some sort of oscillator. If you want to do that, yeah, sure, make a recording of your oscillator, right? But don't try to like import it with some kind of tool. Just take it into an audio editor, like find zero crossings that represent a single cycle of that wave, right? Cut that out, save it as save it in wave format, and then convert it, resample it to exactly 2048 samples in length, and put that in a wavetable as a frame, and then maybe if you want other waveforms, put them in there. That'll be a much more precise way of getting a single cycle waveform from that, from that sample. But what if we wanted to emulate acoustic instruments or other kinds of acoustic samples? Like a human voice or something. Well, there are tools for doing that. And I'm going to talk about that real quick. Let's look at Phase Plant, okay? We'll go into Phase Plant and let's look at the sample import capabilities, and then we'll talk about some of the challenges and the core mathematical challenges in converting a sample into an effective wavetable. Where we're going to go with this is actually have a new product. It's very cheaply priced. It's called KRC Orchestral Impressions, where I've in bulk converted a bunch of orchestral samples into wavetables with varying degrees of success. Like the early days of KRC Math Waves, KRC Orchestral Impressions is going to be an ongoing project, and by getting in now, you will get superior versions of conversions as I come up with them. You also get, in addition to a whole bunch of wavetables, like right now there's 38,000 wavetables in there. Some are great, some are not so great. It's a little bit about exploration. We'll get there. But you also get the script that I used to do this conversion, and there's already two versions of the script. So after having hit upon an algorithm that actually does a pretty good job in bulk of like taking this whole orchestral library and converting it into wavetables. Within about 48 hours, I had a superior technique. So this is going to be an ongoing project. But the intro price for KRC Orchestral Impressions is just $5. Get in on that, and you will have a lot of entertainment for why do we need to panic? A lot of synth programming fun for months and months to come, for sure. Okay, I'm going to take a short break, and then we'll look at Phaseplant and sample import in Phaseplant, and we'll talk about the fundamental issues involved in sample-to-wavetable conversion. Okay. All right. So I've got Bigwig open now, and I've got Phaseplant, Kilohertz Phaseplant open. And there's a wavetable in here. I just thought this was funny because this sort of accidentally happened. I've got a wavetable in here that's actually the conversion of a sample that's a sustained violin ensemble. It's like an arco vibrato articulation. And this conversion is not good, but it does sound like a Wookie. So that's kind of neat. But anyway, if you're in Phaseplant has a usually very good sample to wavetable converter built into it. You can access that by hitting this little button right here. But I guess we should talk about this patch really quick. So we've just got a very simple patch with one wavetable oscillator in it. Just an amplitude envelope, and then we've got an envelope that's morphing the position of the frames, right? And so it's just a little descending attack decay type of envelope that's gonna morph over the life of the wavetable, right? So if we're in Phaseplant, we can do like this. We can say new, and then we can say create from sample, and we can go grab some audio sample from our system. And let's go into here. Is this the one that's misbehaving? Because mostly its conversion works really well. Yeah, that's the one that misbehaves. That's really bad. Let's try a different articulation, shall we? We'll go new, create from sample. I mean, that's fun and everything. But let's see, strings. Maybe we'll do like, oh, it's a solo violin. Let's try to do a violin section. Let's do let's see, sustained vibrato. We'll grab C4 velocity 2, shall we? This should work better. Well, it's not working better at all, is it? Well, this is one of the challenges with sample to wavetable conversion, isn't it? That sometimes it doesn't work, and even if we try to align our phases, we don't necessarily get a very good result. That surprises me. I thought for sure this one would work okay. Whatever. We're going to talk about the challenges of doing this sort of thing. What about a different pitch? Is it just detecting the pitch badly? Well, my technique works a lot better. Let's get some different instrument. That's really funny. Let's see here. Let's try a brass sample, shall we? How about a trumpet articulation? Let's go with a sustained trumpet. That should be really easy. Let's see here. Let's see. Sustained trumpet, sustained C3 velocity 1. Sure. Okay. So now, when we import a sample like this, usually we wouldn't have any phase alignment done on it. And what Phaseplant does is it reads the sample in, and then it creates the frames of the wavetable for us. Now, one thing that Phaseplant does really well is it extracts cycles from the waveform and puts them in the wavetable. And it gets the momentary pitch quite right. But there's more than just getting the pitch of each cycle right. There are phase problems that can happen. And so there's a bunch of different phase alignment options. Like we can have no phase alignment. And if we do that, I don't know if we'll see this very well. You can see that things are kind of jumping all over the place. And we're hearing both pitch and phase like all crazy, but there's other phase alignment modes. So let's try the naive one. I don't know exactly what these algorithms are that are in phase plant, but naive does that. Let's see, let's do correlate, which I believe, yeah, it looks like it correlates the phases of the individual extracted cycles much better. And okay, we're starting to get a trumpet now. My attack might be a little too slow. So, we're essentially extracting like the core timbre of this file. Let's try lock fundamental. So the fundamental is like the lowest pitch. It's like the strongest harmonic that's in the sample. And if we lock those, we'll get that's a little smoother. Doesn't really sound much like a trumpet, but it's trumpet-like. And was that like eating all my CPU? Maybe. And then we can do lock all, where we can try to lock all of the harmonics across the wavetable. And that gives us maybe the best result so far. Now, you'll also hear that because we've processed the phase across different harmonics, the wavetable version of the sample starts to get like a little watery sounding. Now, partly that's just like the natural kind of vibrato that's in this sample. We could change the speed with which we traverse the wavetable to try to even that out a bit. Turn it off, the phase alignment. Whoa! That's not very good. So there's challenges, right, in doing this. And the big problem, beyond the fact that, the wavetable representation, even when in phase plant, you've got 256 frames in the wavetable, the wavetable version is a decimation of the original audio sample, and won't preserve all characteristics of it. Beyond that, like, this is a one at a time thing, right? We saw that, well, this particular pitch worked better than that other pitch that we picked, and different articulations might work better than others. Let's try like maybe the mute. There's a harmon mute and a straight mute. Let's try the harmon mute, and let's see. Let's pick what pitches do we have here? Well, let's just try like C3, velocity 3. Let's see what that does. I mean, if there's no phase alignment, it doesn't work at all. I mean, that's a muted trumpet sound. But it's not like really great. Anyway, sorry, I keep not finishing my thought because I'm effing around here with you. This is pretty loud too. I should probably turn this down. Let's see. There we go. That's a little nicer on our ears. I mean, beyond the fact that different samples will have different success in conversion, and we have to fiddle with the phase alignment to get some sort of some result that we like. We can only do this one sample at a time. Like, there's no bulk conversion facility. So, to my mind, like, this is a little frustrating and a little bit tiresome, right? Because what I like to do is like have a whole bunch of stuff to kind of go through and crate dig, right? So my thinking lately has been like, well, okay, even though I'm not a big fan of sample to wavetable conversion, It's an interesting area, like code-wise and I guess mathematically, to explore. And it's like, hey, if I could get like a good enough or even an excellent algorithm going, it would be fun to take a huge library of samples, convert them into wavetables, and then see what kind of synthesis ideas we could come up with from those, right? And so that's what I set out to do. The other thing I did is I realized I had seen these before, but there are these open source orchestral libraries that they're completely open source. They're like CC0, and so there's two of them. They're related to each other. Let me just say done here so that we can actually see our browser, shall we? There's one called VSCO, and another called VCSL. And the one is kind of a more advanced version of the other. Some of the files that are in them, there's a little crossover of, in the later edition, which I think is VSCL. Yeah, it's VSCL. There are some samples that are from VSCO, but they've been noise reduced and maybe looped better, whatever. The looping and stuff, by the way, doesn't matter if we're going to convert them into wavetables, right? But these are completely open source. And so this was good source material that I could convert into wavetables and then share with you through KRC Orchestral Impressions. And like I say, I can also share with you scripts for converting your own samples. Like if you're like me, you've got a library of many gigabytes of samples, and you might want to play with these ideas with some samples that you own already, but that you may or may not be able to redistribute, right? So it's a multifaceted project. Okay. I guess it's another break time. We showed like how FacePlant works. By the way, even though those imports that we did weren't particularly successful, the FacePlant's sample conversion is actually quite impressive. It solves, or it attempts to solve, both of the problems that we have when we convert a sample to a wavetable. It handles the pitch, and it believe it or not, it handles the pitch very well. Let's get a string sample like it. Strings, I think, work a lot better. Well, wait a minute. We already saw them fail. Let's try a string ensemble, shall we? Let's try the cello section, maybe. Cello section, and let's do the tremolo version. Let's see. These are lower. Maybe these will work better. Let's do the C1 V2 articulation. The original sampler is quite a bit longer, so let's change that decay. Let's change the speed with which we go through this wavetable. Ah, there we go. That's getting more like a cello section. And you can hear that there is tremolo in this. Okay, so I mean, that's getting more into the range of something that's useful. I guess the best result is with lock all. If we did some other fixes here, like normalizing the sample, will it be better? Yeah, somewhat. Now, of course, if we were to filter this, right, we could get some better synthesis going. Filter out some of that nonsense in the high end. I don't know. It's not that great. So this is why I kind of get frustrated with these kind of tools. But is there a chance we could do a better job? Maybe so. Even if we're not very familiar with this. So let's give that a try. Again, it's break time, and we'll be back with KRC Orchestral Impressions. So, in that previous segment, I did not mean to give the impression that FacePlant's sample-to-wavetable conversion facilities were shitty. I'm surprised, actually, just randomly clicking around, I couldn't get a good sample conversion. But this is challenging stuff. So what I set out to do is to create a way to do bulk wavetable conversion, like take all of the samples from that open source sample library, which are very diverse. There's percussion, there's strings, there's brass. Some conversions work better than others. But there's a whole bunch of different instruments. They're pretty well multi-sampled. You know, it's not like deep sampling like you'd get in a modern orchestral library. But they're good enough, and it's kind of just about the right size to develop a script for doing these sorts of conversions. Now, I was basically familiar with the concept of turning a sample into a wavetable. I mean, basically, it's a process of decimation, right? So we've got a sample that has some bass frequency. You know, there's going to be vibrato, there's going to be timbre changes, right? Think of a human voice. There's going to be pitch changes, stuff like that. So, and then we've got a wavetable. Let's consider the wavetable empty now. The way that I create wavetables for maximum compatibility with today's wavetable synthesizers is that they have no more than 64 frames, right? Each frame is 2048 samples and it's 32 bits. So we need to find a way to take that original sample and sort of cut it up into segments that correspond to the pitch of that sample, right? And then once we've got single cycles extracted from that, figure out which ones we're going to use in the wavetable, convert all of those, like resample them to 2048 samples in length, 32-bit, and then assemble our wavetable, right? Save it out. Now, as we saw in Phaseplant's sample import, there's two components, right? There's getting that pitch part right, which is tougher than I thought it would be. And then there's the phase part, like how do you make a phase coherent wavetable? And so for the phase part, I did some research. So I used deep research in ChatGPT, which is an awesome new facility. I did a whole video about it. And I researched like phase locking and phase coherence in wavetable synthesis. And I got a really great report back about this issue and about approaches to phase locking harmonics. You know, we can use additive synthesis and partial tracking to do that. We could use phase vocoders to do that. We can use pitch synchronous extraction. So this was actually very useful to me. I didn't at the time follow this exact research paper by Richard Bristow Johnson, which actually tells you everything about the basics of wavetable synthesis, kind of from an early point. It's not really talking about wavetables in the way that we know them today, but just the concept of single cycle waveforms in a synthesizer. And it also has a great discussion of how to do this like pitch synchronous extraction. I didn't use his technique at first because I was a little concerned about his crossfading technique and things like that. I was like, well, can't we just find the local pitch at any point and just go out that number of samples, and that should be a clean waveform? It turns out that it isn't always. And so the V20, this is the first version of the script that I include with KRC Orchestral, what am I calling this thing? KRC Orchestral Impressions. Yeah, that's it. See, I just haven't said that very much yet. So anyway, I learned about how we might extract segments from a waveform, and then some very interesting ideas on the different types of phase alignment between frames. And one interesting thing is that the research thingy, GPT, went out and actually read all of the kilohertz documentation, as well as some stuff from Steinberg that touches on these issues. And it was very good at understanding and getting back to the math of how all the different kilohertz phase plant phase alignment techniques work. So I learned a lot about that. And what I was thinking about is, okay, if we have a audio sample and we extract all these segments from it, is there a way that we could, instead of changing phase, instead of like tracking phase, like after we've assembled the wavetable and like munging the waveforms up, could we not like have enough samples that we could smartly choose which ones go into our 64 frames? That is, take into account not just what waveform should appear roughly at what time, if we think about time as the stacked waveforms in the wavetable, not just the harmonic amplitudes of that waveform, but also its phase with respect to the previous waveform that we decided was best for the previous position. And so I created an algorithm using statistical techniques, using k-means clustering to actually cluster the individual cycles that we've cut out of the original audio sample. And then to, from that cluster, like pick the one that's closest to the harmonic centroid of all the other waveforms that are roughly at that time. Okay. And then the next time we pick a waveform, we pick it not just based on spectral centroid, but also on its potential phase alignment with the previous frame. And it turns out that like this actually works pretty well. So we were just listening to, one of these V20 extracted wavetables. This is a bassoon, and this wavetable has 16 frames in it. What I eventually came up with, I guess I'll jump to the script real quick. What I do in the script is I actually make different numbered frame wavetables for each and every sample that's in this sample library. So there's a 64 frame wavetable. That would be like the most detailed one. Then a 32, a 16, an 8 frame, 6 frames, 4 frames, and 3 frames. So that these kind of go from a more detailed wavetable that may have significant kind of phase jumps in it, but sometimes they don't, down to ones that are more impressionistic. Consider if we're only doing a 4-frame wavetable, like we're taking that original sample and we're sort of considering it as 1, 2, 3, 4 sections. And then there's a bunch of different segments, right, in each of those sections or batches. And we're picking like the best, most representative waveform for the start. And then we pick the next best representative waveform from the second section, the third, and the fourth, right? And also considering how their harmonics align. So there's a couple of parameters that can be changed in this script. There's a parameter called alpha, which is the weight of the Euclidean distance of the sample we pick from the centroid of the other single cycle waveforms around it. And then there's also this parameter called beta that weights the phase difference cost. That is like how different the phases have shifted between the previous frame. And then there's a parameter for the number of harmonics that we're going to consider in that phase difference weighting. So in the example I'm looking at right here, it's set to 5 in the samples that exist. In the Orchestral Impressions collection right now, I use num harmonics as 3, which seems to work pretty well. Let's see. That's not exactly the 21, but that is the same. Those are the same parameters that we have. Let's look at actual version 20. We were just looking at version 27, which is the superior one to the version that I just created. It's got the same ideas in it. Alpha, beta, number of harmonics, number of frames. There's also a trim function. So I noticed that in these, in the samples that I was using, there's very long tails on them, and most of the tail is either like, room noise or reverb or something. So I did a pretty aggressive trimming on them. So I trimmed both the start and the end to get rid of any silence. The other thing this does, of course, is it cuts off the attacks a little bit. But attacks are very difficult because actually attacks don't have a pitch generally. They're essentially, there's a lot of noise, right? So those particular samples may not have a determinable pitch at that point. And so we have to decide what we're going to do with them. And so in the version 20, sorry, I'm itchy. In the version 20 version of my script, for any segment that appears to be unvoiced, that's one of the things that the pitch detection algorithm That's one of the things that the pitch detection algorithm that I'm using, it's actually called Yin, it can send you back the chance that the pitch at that point is either voiced or unvoiced. And so in this version of the conversion script, if a segment is unvoiced, we actually throw it out. So if it doesn't have a determinable pitch, we just don't use it because we're going to have this big cluster of valid waveforms anyway. So we just throw them out. So it's not a big deal that I trimmed the attacks a little bit because this approach isn't really trying to make something that sounds exactly like the input audio waveform. It's to extract the timbre from that instrument and to get its, we'd call gross or kind of main changes over time. We're not trying to model the detail. Another thing I do is that I didn't want to bother with modeling amplitude changes because we're really decimating this audio sample down to at a max 64 frames. It seems a waste to me if you've got one of those frames that's like much lower in volume than another one, because we're never going to really successfully model tremolo at this kind of level with just 64 frames, 64 single cycle waveforms. That doesn't make a lot of sense. To me, at least. So in my approach, we actually normalize every single waveform. And again, because this statistical approach to picking the samples kind of bins them into here are the things that are representative and here are the things that are outliers. I believe what would happen is the things that are weird and noisy, because they were very low amplitude, those end up kind of out of consideration. And none of those are ever going to appear as like the best answer to, what is the best frame for this position. So it kind of doesn't make any sense to me. Now in phase plant and other conversion routines, they will preserve the amplitude changes. And I think we sort of heard that in that tremolo example that we played with the cellos, that harmonically didn't sound so good, but it did have that amplitude pumping that would come from tremolo. Anyway, blah-de-blah-de-blah. Hey, if you like talky synthesizer content like I do, like and subscribe for more talky synthesizer content. Also, all the stuff I'm talking about today, there'll be links in the description, okay? There's always links in the description, especially to wavetables.lol, where you can get this new collection of orchestral wavetables. Now that we've talked about kind of the general, at a very high level, how my extraction script works, let's see some examples, okay? Or hear some examples. All right, so, I hope that sort of made sense, at least at a high level. Now, let's take a listen to some of the wavetables that come out of this technique. So here is a bassoon using a 16-frame version of the wavetable. All of these wavetables, they start with an F followed by the number of frames. So F16 is not a fighter jet. It means that this is a 16-frame waveform, and then we've got the original name of the sample. For the most part, there were some extra identifiers and things that I stripped out to try to make these fit on the screen. But that's always a problem. It's like there's a trade-off between like detail in the file name or the wavetable name, and the length that gets displayed in the various interfaces. So this is a bassoon. The articulation here is sus for sustain. The original pitch of the sample is G2, or at least that's where it's supposed to be mapped. V usually indicates like velocity, so this would be like velocity 2, this one would be velocity 1. That is velocity 1, here's velocity 2. Or it might mean variations, hard to say in different ones. And then when you import these into Korg Modwave or to Korg Multipoly, it has a concept of collections. So each of the individual instruments and articulations mostly are tagged as their own collection. So you can see that this is part of a collection called KRC Orc. They all begin KRC Orc for KRC Orchestra, and this is KRC Orc Bassoon Sus. So these are bassoon sustains, okay? Now, if we wanted to, this sounds really good, right? Let's talk about it a little bit. Let's talky. about the wave shapes here. So you can see that that even though there is phase change here, it's nice and gradual. And so when this technique of mine works, that is when the pitch gets identified the right way, and when the k-means clustering works, it works awesomely. And you will see wavetables like this. Let's move this back down, shall we? That proceed very smoothly. And one thing I've done with a lot of these examples is you'll note that there's a little modulation on tune that ramps in after a while. We're just doing that with the pitch LFO. The pitch LFO is set to fade in over 1.3 seconds. It's got a relatively low speed. You know, so there's some vibrato that comes in. That's completely synthesized. That's not part of the wavetable itself, of course, because the wavetable can't model pitch. So we do that. Another technique I'm doing is you'll see there's a little wibble at the end here when the position of the currently playing wave hits toward the bottom. What I'm doing there is I'm modulating position very, very slightly, a value of 2 with OS1 LFO. So this is a very slow LFO that's also fading in. And what that does, I've showed this with some of the KRC math waveforms. You know, there are certain types of wavetables when they stop moving, they sound very different. And so one thing that works very nicely with these kind of acoustic instrument wavetables is if you can keep the wavetable slightly in motion by just modulating position with an LFO, very gently faded in over time, and so this never stops moving. If we hold the note really long, there's always a little bit of timbral motion there. Okay, now bassoon is not a very exciting instrument. I'm going to grant you that. Let's just do one other thing real quick, though. Let's listen to the 64 frame version of this. Let's see if we can find it. So now that I've got this picked, right, I could say, give me bassoon, sus, G2, all of them, right, like this. And somewhere in here, there'll be the 64 frame version. There it is. 64 frames, bassoon, sus, G2. Now, when there are more wavetable frames, there will be a little more attacky stuff, and there's more of a chance that the phase alignment won't work. And again, it's not really phase alignment because we're not actually changing any of these single cycle waveforms at all. We're just trying to pick them in an intelligent way so that we will wind up with these mostly smooth transitions. So in this one, you'll hear this kind of a sharp tick at the beginning. That's kind of the first waveform in the attack that's not pure noise. So that click might not make a lot of sense to you. And so when you're working with these 64 frame ones, what you might consider doing is instead of just, you know, starting the sweep of the position all the way up at the maximum value, you might try giving it a little bit of a slower attack. And so, of course, what this is going to do is going to quickly traverse the wavetable, but it'll maybe soften up that click a bit. I mean, a little bit, right? It does that a little bit. And then what we could do, I don't know how fast the bassoon attack is. It's not very fast. You know, we might change our amp envelope attack to be a little slower. You know, so okay, so that's not 100% like a sample, but again, like we can never really get an exact representation of the sample with a 64 frame wavetable, but that's just another tip. Of how you might deal with those things. Of course, the other thing we could do is we don't have to traverse the whole wavetable. We could just dial it down a bit so that we skip that most aggressive waveform. That's pretty nice. Okay, again, bassoons, not very interesting. There are some samples that create wavetables that are quite surprising. There are some bell tree samples in this collection of symphonic instruments, and this you can see that there's a lot of phase changes across this wavetable. But each single cycle is kind of a variation on a sine wavy sound. And so you could do things like this. I turned this into an arpeggiated patch where randomly we are changing the position of the frame in the wavetable, okay, using the random modulator here. And I've got crossfade width turned all the way down, so we're just picking out like the exact frames of the wavetable. And in doing that, we get this. Which I think is really nice. I mean, we don't have to have the crossfade width all the way down. With it up, it's gonna pick out some morphs between the various frames. And of course, we could also, with our amp envelope, which is just a very short, kind of chime type envelope, just attack and decay, we could modulate position so that we get a little swoop. And I haven't really listened to what that sounds like here. So let's just do, whoops, what am I trying to do here? There we go. So we're going to modulate position with the amp envelope. Hey, there we go. Let's see, that's a generator. That's the amp envelope. And let's just set it small. See, if I set it too big, you hear this kind of swish, swish. But we could set it small. And we don't have to go up. Now there's some variation across each of those individual hits. Pretty cool, pretty cool. So percussion instruments can work pretty well. Some of the struck instruments like xylophone and marimbas do not do well with this V20 script. And so I do want to stress that while there are 38,000 or so wavetables in this orchestral impressions library of wavetables right now, it's not all killer, no filler. There are some instruments, there are some waveforms where this technique just does not work well. And one of the ways it will fall down is in the pitch detection. I have improved that in the next version of my script, and I was almost tempted to like not debut this project and just start with the improved version. But this is one of those this is not just like a product. Again, it's like cheap. It's $5. This is like a follow along with me at home, have fun, explore, kind of project. This will not be the only video about this project ever. There's going to be a lot more. But it's the kind of thing that you can explore with me. And then, as I develop new techniques, I will add, better or different versions of these wavetables, and actually, hopefully, some new wavetables from new samples, but I have to talk to some people about licensing, and it will grow over time. At the very least, you will get like all of the new scripts for doing the new techniques that I either work with or discover. So, okay, moving on. Here's actually an example of some wavetables that are made with the latest version of my script, not the original one. So this is using that Bristow-Johnson technique for extracting the segments from the waveform. And listen to this. Beautiful strings, right? And there's no tearing here. I mean, there's no tearing at the edges of these wavetables. So if I change phase here, and then if I rotate the phase a little bit, you see what's happening. Like these points are moving into view. Here, if there's any error in the pitch estimation, it's going to show up as like a little crease here, and you'll see it in some of the original wavetables, maybe even a lot of the original wavetables, but you won't find it in ones that I've done with this technique. And I will be uploading these new improved versions of these wavetables at some point in the near future. But you can do really great stuff. So this is a contrabass, is the original sample here. So like a low string instrument. And you can hear that there's a little bit of rosin in those bows. Pretty nice. Another variation on that. Pretty interesting. You might think that's a sample. Let's see. There are woodwinds in the collection. Here's a conversion that's not completely convincing. This is a clarinet. And you can see there's not really any attack information in this wavetable, partly because it's 16 frames. But still, I think that's a useful texture. Let's see. There are claviers in this collection. They're under a category called what is it? It's zithers, claviers, and then you got pianos and harpsichords in there. And some of the piano samples converted okay. Let's see, this is all in layer 1. So what we've got is got a 4-frame, this is a Steinway piano that's morphing with, actually this is an updated version, V24, which is not in the collection right now, but it's a 16-frame grand piano sample. And what we're doing is we're using Korg Multiplay's A-B mode to morph between this the lower pitch, not lower pitch, but kind of lower intensity sound. Let's change note number, let's change velocity to 0. So here's the 4-frame piano sound by itself. Let's turn off layer A as well. So it's a very soft, like almost no attack kind of piano, right? It's played softly. It's a piano played piano, and then that's morphing using velocity and also key track to a much higher energy wavetable with 16 frames. And it almost feels overdone in the high registers, right? It's like, wow, that's really like nasally. But down lower, it's very piano-like. And then if we, turn all the modulation back on, it's the combination of that less energetic tone with the more energetic tone mixed via velocity that's at about 73. We get a nicely velocity sensitive piano sound. I think in future versions of these wavetables, they'll be quite a bit better. But that one's okay. One sample type that converted very well in the original version is there's a set of didgeridoo samples. And that's really fun to morph in the same way as we were doing with the piano. So this is a wavetable AB patch where we've got, I think this might be the same or very similar bassoon sample loaded into slot A. And then in wave B, we've got this didgeridoo sound, and we're morphing using OS2 envelope. So that's an envelope, it's got a short attack and a longer decay. It's a very interesting sound. This goes from that whir, whir, whir of the didgeridoo to the simplicity of the bassoon, which is almost, it's like a square-ish wave, triangular kind of wave. Now that's just a didgeridoo note down here, but there are phrases too, and because didgeridoo phrases change kind of slowly, they do turn into decent wavetables. Listen to this. It's weird, right? It's synthy, but also organic. And we could use this more like a synth, right? We don't have a filter engaged here, but what if we modulated our filter? It's two-pole low pass, put some resonance on it. This will probably sound pretty weird. Also a little funky. That's kind of cool. Other examples. These are not in the collection because I do not have the rights to distribute them. Well, I might, but I'm not comfortable with it just yet. I had a set of discs from my Ensoniq EPS 16, I'm quite sure, that had this sound called Anavoxes. So it was a double layer patch that had these choir girl samples, and then combined with some analog synth samples. And so this is just the choir girls from that particular patch. These are classic. You might have even seen these file names in places before. The JMF_AW. I guess there's only 7 of them that made up this patch. So there's like 1 per octave. But these convert pretty well. So if you have your own samples, like you can run the version 20 script on, these are very short samples. It did a pretty good job of giving us a decent phase progression to the wavetable. It's a little bit crunchy, but that's part of the sound. And then, you know, I like this kind of sound a lot, so I did a couple different versions. I am become Enya. So one thing that's kind of fun about converting, and these are like lower bit rate kind of samples, to wavetables, is they do get some extra crunch. And I know there's been a resurgence of interest in these, you know, kind of alias sounds, with things like the microwave VST and things like Behringer's version of the PPG wave, etc. This is a way to get those kinds of sounds. And you can see the crunchy distortion here that happened during the upsampling. You can take it too far. Like if you put this in Vintage 8 mode, this will be really, really grungy. Lots of aliasing. You know, we might want to use a filter to take some of that out. Synthwave yourself to sleep. Let's see, another version of that. Here's another one where you can really hear the kind of the buzzy conversion aliasing that happened. Okay, continuing on. Here's a patch made from, let's see, we're only using Wavetable 2 here. Some percussion did convert well. So there's flexitones in this collection, and of course they don't go boy anymore because of course the pitch gets conformed, but that does make for an interesting timbral change. Also, there are a bunch of African instruments. You will find them in like the wave versions and stuff foldered, I think under kalimba, but they're actually mbiras. And there's a whole bunch of different mbiras, many of which converted very well, even in 64 frame. And so here I'm doing the wavetable A-B trick again, where I've got a flexitone in A, I've got this mbira wavetable in B, and this is a very evocative percussion sound, especially as we go low. You hear that nice little shimmer in the background, and you can see it in the waveform. That's coming from the mbira, which is, of course, an African instrument that has like a steel little tines on it. They're like keys. These are also called thumb pianos. And it vibrates. There's a little resonating retainer thing that will often vibrate, and that shows up even in the wavetable. So here's the flexitone, just making this kind of sharp sine wavy sound, and then with the mbira, there's a lot of interesting things you could do. The mbira makes for a really interesting attack, or for something to morph to for the sustain. That was kind of fun. There's another version, just high pass filtered. While individual hits from some of the struck idiophones, as they're called, xylophones and the like, and there's also glockenspiel, they might have converted okay. There's a bunch of glockenspiel effects that are very interesting as wavetables. So here we are. You can look at this wavetable, very high frequency, right? Like this might look like some of the math wavetables in a way, right? Like some of those numeric series wavetables get very complex like this. Some of the variations on the polygonal waveforms look like this. But it's very interesting how this changes across the wavetable. And the timbre change comes because, like, this is a glockenspiel run that's going down, right? But of course, when we conform the pitches in that sample to our wavetable, they're all going to take on the same pitch, but they because of phase changes and because of the conversion, these will turn into different timbres, and this is like a pretty neat effect. You know, this is a very basic patch, but there's a lot more you could do with that. Fun. Surprisingly, harmonicas converted very well. Like, I love to see this type of waveform, right? So this type of wavetable, we've got the smooth phase progression. You can just know this is going to sound pretty good as long as they got the pitches right. Yeah. Now, of course, I had to put the vibrato back into that using synthesis. And you can see also I'm doing the trick where I'm keeping the waveform in motion, just with a very little bit of LFO modulation. So you can do like a convincing harmonica patch. Now, harmonicas obviously don't show up a whole lot in popular music, maybe except in Stevie Wonder, in soul tracks and stuff. Or I guess in certain types of country. But it also strikes me that these waveforms are harmonically rich and would be very interesting, unswept as, let's see, let's turn this off. What are we doing here? Cut off, filter. Maybe get a different, let's see, let's get the MS-20. Let's change the amp where we're simulating the slow attack of a harmonica here. Let's... So that's not very harmonica-like anymore. But I think it's an interesting source as a synthesizer waveform. So, kind of a fun discovery there. Also, it looks like I'm doing something to the pitch, huh? Yeah. We don't need the pitch modulation on there. Let's see, give more attack on the filter. There we go. And that starts to sound, it's sounding a little square wavy, right? So we could even accentuate that. We could use Modwave's odd-only wavetable modifier. Very interesting, unique synth. More nasal up here. Alrighty. More morphs. As I mentioned, while the pianos, a lot of the samples didn't convert very well, harpsichords did for the most part. And so here I'm morphing from a harpsichord waveform to a violin ensemble waveform. And so it's like an interesting very interesting hybrid instrument. You get the idea. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do here. There's some Nepalese bells again that made for a really interesting, like, pad sort of sound here. Really cool stuff. Great when you drop a bunch of effects on it. There are solo brass instruments. Here's a trombone. So this is a 32 frame piano played trombone, a trombone played softly. So you can get, orchestral brass sounding types of stuff. Woodwinds converted kind of interestingly. Like, we listened to a clarinet that didn't have much attack. Sometimes even though we trimmed off the attacks, there's sort of residual attack from the very early frames at the top of the wavetable. And if we traverse them quickly, it will throw off an effect like noise. I was a little surprised by this staccato flute sample that just turned into a waveform, where we hear noise. I am not using the sub-oscillator to introduce noise, by the way. That's actually just coming from that wavetable. So that wavetable has some residual noise in it that's up toward the attack. Pretty cool. Now, of course, synthesizing a flute isn't hard. Just grab a sine wave and put some noise at the beginning of it. But I was pretty happy with how that turned out. Here's another staccato flute. I've slowed the envelope rates down here. So for the position modulation here, I've slowed this down. I think this is the exact same sample. It might be a different pitch. Pretty interesting. There's instruments I don't know what they are. There's a thing called a strum stick. This must be some sort of folk instrument of some type. But we got some pretty good conversions. You'll see this is a 64 frame wavetable. But it's not too phasey, jumping all over the place. It's just got a nice little amount of detail. Kind of fun. Anyway, there's a lot to explore in KRC Orchestral Impressions hand chimes. See, that's what I'm talking about. There's some percussion instruments. I mean, this is fine, but is this a hand chime? I don't know. It's also, we had inserted it into a different program. Again, I did a lot. I've been, as I refine these scripts, I've been testing them against like vocal sounds. And I did convert my friend Morris White using my version 27 script. These are, again, old and sonic samples. And you can build really cool things out of these. You'll have to roll your own, of course, because I can't redistribute this exact sample. Woodwinds, again, can be pretty good. And so there is a tenor sax in here. And so some of the tenor sax samples converted very well. And you can get like this. So what we're doing here is I've got a, oh man, I wish I could see this better. Let's go to play mode so we can see the name of this guy. So we've got, so we've got a staccato in A of the tenor sax. It's a G sharp, it had a special timbre to it, like kind of honky. And then like a lower energy one in number B. Actually, it's probably the other direction. B is probably the higher energy one than A. But then by modulating that AB blend parameter, right, we're modulating it with velocity so that the harder I hit the key, we get that honkier tone that I guess is in wave B. And then, of course, there's no pitch, except for the constrained pitch in the wavetable. So I'm also modulating pitch with some sort of envelope where I'm not sure where that is. I know it's here somewhere because I would expect to find it under tune. Oh, it's here. It's right here. So I actually modulated the tune parameter that's part of the oscillator. So you see that the pitch dips down and then comes back up on the attack. So that's just oscillator 2 envelope that looks like this. It's just a quick decay, but we're modulating negatively, so that dips the pitch down. It comes back up very fast, and it's being scaled with exponential velocity. So, this is straight out of the tricks that they used in emu romplers, which were the source for these baritone saxes and tenor saxes that you hear in cheesy dance music from a certain time period. Stuff like that, right? Okay, I feel like I'm running out of time. There's more morphs here. Of course, you have to set up the morphs yourself, and not every synthesizer can do this, but like combining vocals, we're looking at the wrong wavetable, combining vocals with these ensemble string sounds makes for some beautiful patches. I'll talk more when I have more time about how to construct stuff like this, but I've already told you everything to know about that. What we're doing here is, we're modulating AB blend using note number so that it's stringy down in the lower parts of the keyboard and it's vocally on the higher parts of the keyboard. And then also there's an envelope that's modulating the blend. Very, very pretty stuff. Okay, with that, I did take some stabs at pianos. This is pretty nice, and I believe these are from, so these are again like V20 versions. One thing that happened though is a lot of the piano conversions have what I was talking about, noticeable seam where the pitch wasn't identified correctly, and you can hear it a little bit in this one. We don't see it very strongly. It's about right here. There's a little bit of a discontinuity, and at lower pitches it shows up. Hear that clickety clickety click? My version 27 script does not do that. So this is a passable like rave piano. But it will growl a little bit in the lower registers. So there you go. That's a quick introduction to acoustic wavetables and the difficulties and the challenges that we have in converting a sample to a wavetable. You can go get my giant collection of open sourced, what am I trying to say? Open sourced. So like these wavetables are sourced from open source samples. They sound pretty good. There's 38,000 of them. At least half of them are good or excellent. And then, like I say, this is a project where you get to come along with me. I'm going to do more videos about it. I'll release more scripts. I'll teach you how to use the scripts at some point. If you're a Python person, you can do it. Look, if you're a ChatGPT person, you can like just throw the script at GPT. It'll tell you everything you need to do to like run the thing. So that's it. I'm going on travel for like a week and a half. So I won't see you until I'm back from that, but have fun. And it's your old pal Keith from wavetables.lol saying ta-ta for now.